Broadcast has started.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are going to wait a few minutes to allow a few more participants to join us. So thank you for your patience. And before we get started today, I just want to say Happy Nurses Day, Happy Healthcare Worker Day, and also just want to acknowledge essential workers all the way around. So even if you're a nurse, a healthcare provider, a physician, or even just those that help us put groceries on our shelves and help with our basic necessities, we thank you. So I just want to mention that. I just have to put that in. So,
Absolutely.
but we're going to get started here in a few minutes, and we do appreciate you joining us and this lovely day. And we are very excited to get this going. Today is, what is it? I think we don't even know what date it is. It is May 6th, and it is a Wednesday. So if anybody wants to take a note of that, that is what today is.
I feel like that was a good message for me.
Yes, good. You took a note of that, Lisa. Well, we do appreciate everybody joining us today, and just, you know, being part of this great initiative that we've taken to help employers and small businesses with people strategy. It's definitely been a great journey for us, and we are just appreciative of everybody that continues to participate with everything we're doing today. So a couple more minutes and we'll get, well, about a minute and a half, and then we'll get going here. Get that cup of Joe.
That's right.
I never feel alive until I have that cup of Joe in the morning. This is about 10:03.
No, I think we're all good. We got a lot of people that have joined up. So.
Well, good morning. Good morning, everyone. And hello, and welcome to today's discussion around people strategy, a forum of leading experts discussing the recovery phase of COVID-19. So thank you so much for joining us with our continued conversation. And we are working hard to help you as a business leader, an HR leader, a CEO, or whatever level, senior level position that you're in, to manage and thrive during this epidemic and pandemic is a better word, and beyond. So my name is Char Miller, and I will be your host today. And just so you know who I am a talent management consultant and people strategist. I'm also a personal business owner of my own company, and that is the Rocky Mountain Health Advocate Company. And then also I provide career coaching for people that are going through transition either early in their career or throughout their career. So also I have just the joy of having a couple of colleagues here. I'm pleased to introduce Sam Reeve, who is the co-sponsor of these events. And also he's the CEO and founder of CompTeam. And so he'll help us with our discussion today. And then also I'd like to introduce Lisa Jackson, who is a keynote speaker and a culture change expert with Corporate Culture Pros. So again, we thank you for joining us today. And before I announce our speaker today, I just want to mention that we will have all of our bios here on the You can look at more extensive experiences and information about our speaker today there. So without further ado, I'm about to introduce André Blom, who is the CEO of TMA International, and he's also the co-founder of the TMA method, and he's also a keynote speaker. So today he's going to discuss how to future-proof your business with innovative and people strategies. So André, actually, wait a minute, okay, I just about messed up here. I need to talk about a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, in today's discussion, we do encourage you to participate in the chat that's below here. And the chat is going to be a place where you can put questions, any thoughts that you're thinking about. also, you can then put in your chat, and then we'll facilitate that conversation with our speaker. Also, just so you know that we'll add any attachments to the compteam.net website. And also, we encourage you to come to next week's registration, the next session, which is the People Strategy session. And Sam will send you the registration for that. And then also, during today's session, we want it to be extremely interactive. So if you could put any questions, comments, any things that you'd like to discuss, Andre will personally address those during his presentation. And then also, we'll share a copy of this recording on compteam.net, and we encourage you to share that information on your social media outlets. And so again, without further ado, I'd like to introduce André Blom.
Thank you and good morning. In my case, I should say good afternoon. I'm situated here in Portugal, in Europe, and it's a privilege to be on this stage. Maybe you will think like, what is this guy doing standing behind that old flip chart? Isn't that something revealing of his age? Or is it that he is trying to do something different than just sit on a chair and try to be transmitting all kinds of information? Well, I want to do the last thing. I want to make it interactive, and to ensure you the things that I will draw on the whiteboard or that we are explaining to you. I will also make a graphic record of it and upload it later on the comteam.net later on. So again, welcome to my keynotes. As you have probably know, I will talk about what is actually happening with all the disruptive elements that we have on our globe yet in this moment, and how we can survive this from a people strategy. Now, in general, you could say that the disruption that we are dealing with in itself, not really a big thing. But if you think about it, the impact and all the other disruptions we have, think about the climate change, the geopolitics that we are encountering, the technology, the use of artificial intelligence, of data mining, on machine learning, on globalization, on migration streams, on wars, and now this war with the COVID comes in. I mean, how do we deal with that? And I think that after the shock of what is happening, because this was unprecedented, people start to realize, hey, what is going on? Is this a wake-up call? What can we do in order to survive and overcome this challenge and make it for the better? So I would try to tap in from an abstract perspective and go down in helping you out and maybe guiding you a little bit in what could be done in order to overcome this. So let's have just a close look what is happening. And if I would make a snapshot of an organization, which is normally in a building, or maybe nowadays it's more on a distance, that is more on a laptop where the workforce is. And I will take a couple of these shots and say, like, let's open some windows. Let's open the window, and what do I see now in this period where there's so much disruption also by the COVID-19, how we are going to deal with that. And if I look inside an organization, I can say, like, there is a workforce. And another window that I will open, then I can say something, hey, I see something of a culture. Maybe I can identify the culture of the organization. And what is actually the brand of the organization, the identity. And these are pretty much related, because it is people who are saying something, who are actually manifesting and making a culture alive, and the culture of your organization is saying something about your brand. Now, one of my, I call it open dogmas. Where do I come from? As Char mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders of the TMA method, and I work on an international base. So without bragging too much, I feel myself a little bit like Mr. McKinsey himself, because I can tap into so many different companies and hear and observe what is going on. So in that way, I am pretty privileged with my job. What I And why do I call it an open dogma? The dogma is actually just giving me a justification of my keynotes and have an idea and a concept and how I can share that with you. And I call it an open dogma because what I have said is like, if you look at the workforce and how is that related to your brands, I believe there is no corporate branding without personal branding. And if you look at the system on the population and the groups that we have in our organization, it is the people who are making it work. It is not the technology or the resources that identifies the quality of your service or the way you are positioned and appreciated. Let's look at the other side because there are some more windows to open. I also see some kind of operating mode, depending on the resources that company have, depending on the processes that are organized, etc. And then I hope to identify some leadership that is making it work. And then there's also another element, and that is particularly here in this environment, is that can we reinvent ourselves? Because I think that is the big challenge. If you look at what is happening now with the shock, we were all overwhelmed. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear for, do I get affected? How does it impact on my family? And people start working at home. Now, let me address something about that too. What is happening with our co-workers, with our employees at home? My own girlfriend, for example, she's an anthropologist and she's been working for the child phone in Europe. And the amount of phone calls that the children are giving to these kind of institutes about the gender violence in families, it's amazing. The idea that what is happening with the COVID is building up so much anxiety and aggression, that is something that we really have to take care of. And it's another element of the shock is now that people are used to working at home. Maybe you have the integrator and the segregator. The integrator is the one who is capable of dealing with the job challenges and with being the family man or wife, how to deal with. If they can integrate it, then it's going fine. But what if people can't? And what is happening with people who have to commute like maybe 10 or 12 hours every week to go to the job and do automated work? Now they can do it at home. Another element what we have observed is that the productivity of people working at home is apparently higher than when they're on the office. So when it comes to reviving and getting into a fit mode in the aftermath of this crisis, what are you going to do? Are you going to cut down on people, or are you going to cut down on the expenditures of your office? So there are a lot of questions that we can ask if we look inside an organization. And this is, of course, for every organization, this is a bit different, but let's step in a little bit more about what is it actually what will help an organization to overcome this. If I would make the next assumption is, how does work work? And let's focus in on the talents of people, on the workforce. And if you think about what is actually giving added value to the organization, is that the resources, is that are that the means, or are that the people? Well, I believe that if you have resources in terms of human resources, and I actually don't like the word, I rather prefer the word talents. If you have a group of talents with each other and they can work from their strength and you combine that, then you get a really nice workforce. But how is it organized now in the organization? Let's draw a simple organizational structure. And this is what is happening. You see a lot of those, what I will call silos in the big picture. And this is the front office. They are working, and most of the time they're working isolated. And then you have maybe the most expensive instrument of organization, management, in order to make sure that the procedures and the protocols are organized. This is a lot about bureaucracy. And then you have the top management. And it's always like this top-down organization. And does this work? Here you see the frontline managers in the top, and they are struggling to figure out how can we connect and how can we make sure that the strategy and the organization is in a good flow. Now, this is scientific management. This is Taylorism. This is also installed in our way of thinking, in our way of organizing our business by Henry Ford. It's almost like an assembly process. And with this assembly process, he was capable of producing a car from scratch to coming out of the factory in 12 minutes. And this is still how we are organized. And I believe that that is not the way forward. What we actually need, in my opinion, and this is also coming from the best cases that I've had, the best practice, what we need is actually a new form of cooperation. And I would call it bringing humanity back into the business. People are not like automated robots. Automation should work for people, and people should be on top of automation. And if you then think about how we can organize a team, and if we take some people, they are related because of their job, because of the objectives that the team or the organization has. And this is about performance. And if you think about performance, this is also a little open dogma that I use. Performance is the result of a joint effort. Because people cannot work by themselves and perform and add value. Not in the way we are organized. There is so much dependency and interdependency. So I believe if we have a good team of people who are unique and who can live and work by their heart, then you get a structure, a cell of people where they are what I call the triple A. Triple A. They are action driven, they are accountable, and they are adaptable. And I think if you allow people to work from their potential for what they are capable of doing, and you organize it in a good way, then you're getting much more profit out of it, much more benefit out of it. The performance will be better, the intrinsic motivation will be there. So just please remind that performance is the result of a joint effort. And then you ask yourself, what about leadership? How does leadership come in? Well, I will get to that back later. So what I would actually like to advocate is like, think about your organization as a human strength. And I don't think it matters in what branch you are working, because resources and technology and operating systems, they are at hand reach for everybody, at arm's length. So if you think about how you can strengthen your organization, it's about bringing the best out of the people. And that leads us to the people strategy. Let me open up the organization again and say, like, we have these cells of adaptable, accountable teams, the triple A teams. And then you can actually see if they are overlapping with other teams, how it could work. So then this is what I would call the workforce. I would replace that as the talent force in order to organize your people. And now it comes to culture, the aspect, the window of culture. The culture of the organization is like, how do you present yourself towards your market and to your customers? How do you actually combine the things inside your organization? What is the social cohesion? What is the professional cohesion? To what kind of ethics are we working with? Because that is so important, because if people feel comfortable in a culture, then you also have another dimension and another dynamic when it comes to, can I retain my talents? Are people willing of working for each other? Are we taking the extra mile for each other? Are we working from our purpose? So your strategy should also always reflect very strong on your culture. And like I said before, this is actually helping you to brand yourself. Maybe you have some experience with, let's call it a call center. If you have some problems with your phone and you're calling a call center agent and they are willing to help you, but they all the time are saying like, yeah, I would like to help you, but the system doesn't allow me. You have to pay the bill anyway. I mean, that is extremely annoying. But if you have somebody with good values and they say like, hey, I'm willing to help you, but I have to go outside the system in order to find a solution. That gives a completely different mindset and experience for your customers. So the culture and the brand are so significantly important, but realize that it is driven by people and not by protocols and mandates and systems. It is allowing people to breathe and to provide the service as they think it's good enough. When I talk then about leadership, well, let's take a good example about leadership. I'm going to stand in front of my flip chart now, because now I'm really addressing and getting into the flow. For me, leadership is about two things, and I'm not talking about if I'm having a leadership model of Greenwich or servant leadership or situational leadership, just in general. Because I think leadership has to do with parenting, or is related to parenting. And for good leadership, you actually have two tools, in one hand and in the other. And in one hand, there is, Gabi, is there a question that I need to address?
There is a question here. What is driving greater employee engagement during the pandemic, and will this last?
Yeah, that is a very, very significant question, and that is also about the culture. Then I will answer this question and put the leadership aside for a moment. But it is related. Why do I emphasize on the culture? Let me give you an example of a company that I grew up in, and that is Randstad. It is a big staffing company, and there was a big disruption in 2012 in Sweden, and I was in contact with the CEO of Sweden. What happened is that in the automotive there were a lot of temporary staffing, and what happened is that by one day to the other, it was really like a flipping point from being on the top to absolutely zero. From 1,200 employees employed every day, the next day, zero. Completely up. So you can think about what this kind of impact it had on the organization. And what could you do? How could you hold on to the people? And the only thing you can do is coming back to your culture. And that is providing trust. And Randstad, I've had the privilege to meet the founder of Randstad, and he says there are three elements of our core values, and this is how we cultivate our culture. And that is, you have to trust, and you have to get acquainted, and you have to serve your employees and your direct employees and your customers. And it is a holistic approach. He was focusing so much on the culture of trusting each other. And that is what the CEO in Sweden did. For 12 weeks, completely burned down, having no business, no revenue stream. He held on to his people by just saying like, we will overcome, we will trust. And of course, there was a lot of money behind from the holding, but that is what happened. And then he was invited by the labor unions after the crisis came over and the automotive branch started to work again, from one day to the other, because he was the only staffing company in that area who was doing this with the employees. And the labor union said like, this was tremendous what you've done, and therefore we are opening up the business and you're getting all the products. So from one day to the other, he had 1,800 products running again. And that is because you give people trust. If you give people anxiety and despair and dissolution, you will not overcome this. And there's another element when how to overcome this element, this challenge that we have now with the COVID. I truly believe if we are focusing on the people and we allow them to engage and to participate and include them in how are we going to overcome this, then I'm sure that a lot of people are saying like, hey, I'm sticking on and I'm willing to invest and to develop myself for the future. And that is also the near future. Maybe the lockdowns are easing up, the emergency states are going down to the next level, and then people start to get moving again. So, and I believe that people can really move forward by this challenge. I hope this answers your question. Now I come back to the significance of leaders, because that is a big part of the culture. Leaders have, as far as I'm concerned, two instruments. The one is like a connector. It's like you are connected to something and you have to connect something else. And the other element is communication. And if you as leaders, it is not enough to say like, I'm available. Or it's not enough to say like, you know, I will help you. I have a command and control button and I will help you and dictate what you have to do. That is not enough. That is not creating inclusion and active participation. This is not building trust, but having the connector, connect people on a social level, connect people on a professional level, connect the people on the strategy of the organization, and communicate and build the narrative and make sure that you know how your people tick and that you are willing to tap in and to say, I am present for you. I'm here. Let's see how I can make things work. How can we do this together? And I think that is the key element of leadership. And another key element for leadership is to listen, because communication is not only speaking and building the narrative, but it's also about listening, active listening. And if you talk to people and how can we do things slightly different, maybe on a marginal level, but if you do that 10 times on a marginal level, you get somewhere. How can you stay adaptable? By listening to people, interacting, and then say like, can I rethink? Can I reimagine myself? Can we reinvent ourselves so that we are prepared for the next move? As I told you, I live in Portugal, and Gabi taught me how to surf, at least to a very simple level. But there's one thing I've learned, and I want to use that metaphor. As a surfer, you have to know when to jump on your board for the right wave. You have to wait. And then you slide on the wave, but you also are aware that you have to jump off to swim back. Because if you don't do that, you end up on the beach. And that is what we call kind of being agile and working with emotions of and the dynamics of your environment. Because that is also what we have learned in the business that we are, the lifetime expectancy of your product or your service or the way you are working, that isn't extending, that doesn't have a lifetime extension anymore for 10 or 15 or 20 years. The disruptions we have just basically out of technology is going so fast that the lifetime expectancy of the way you are operating your company, the way your products are becoming smaller and smaller. So it is really significantly important that leadership is there to make sure that what I will call the operating mode of business is agile, is adaptable, is flexible, is eager to learn. There is where emotion can start, innovation can start. That leadership is the connector and the communicator, and enables the organization and the leadership team to reinvent themselves all the time. And I think if I look at the inside of an organization in that way, this is, in my belief, the only way in how to make sure that organizations have an economical relevance, a social economical relevance. Now coming back to the people strategy, We have to talk about leadership. And this is also what HR, I think, should do. HR, and this was pretty disturbing for me, disturbing information. I'm following all kinds of magazines and news from the McKinsey's and the Boston Consultancy Group. And as my company is grounded in Holland, we also have such an organization who are doing publications. And the publication that concerned me extremely this time was a survey that displayed that of all companies, more than 60% of the companies are putting HR in the fridge. They didn't think that it is adding any value to survive. And it blew my mind. I think if there's one thing that is happening now and where HR can stand up, it is about people. It is how do you deal with all this anxiety and dissolution, and work is going to change and maybe there is some redundancy, and how do we retain the people and to keep them on board? What are we doing? So this is how I feel and how my Dogma is working. The three elements that HR leadership should do. And again, connect and communicate. And for me, that is this. First is they have to align, and it's all about alignment. Align people, the talents of people, with the business objectives. That is the first thing that they have to do. How can I align the talents of people with their obligations, with their targets, with their objectives, and not only on the individual level, but also on the team, because that is the most important thing. Otherwise, there is no business. The second part is, what about individual welfare? And of course, then we can talk about compensation and benefits, but it's also about creating a safe environment where people feel like I can work, there is an eye for me, I can address that today I'm not so happy because whatever happens, because individuals are not just robots that come into an organization. They have feelings, emotions, all kinds of basics in it. So what I say is like the individual welfare is something that HR should do. Connect people with the individual welfare and make sure that your programs are in place. And then the third part, that's the connection, and that is what I call societal welfare. As an organization, if you're small or big, you have an impact on society. And if you have people on board in your company who are feeling well, then you know the chances that they will feel well at home is also a part. And just think what I just said about now with the lockdown, that the violence within families has risen so much. Gender violence, children who are abused by stressed parents, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think in general, this is what HR should do. And this is all about people business. Managing people is not possible. It is not about having the protocols and the systems and the organization in order, but it is really tapping in, who are you? What kind of environment can you work best in? What are your needs? And how can we find the collective elements in it? What is the commonality of interest? What can we do in order to make sure that that is working? Going back to this, if you have your people strategy where HR and leadership are making sure that it is connected to the business objective, to the individual welfare and the social welfare, how do you bring that into practice? So let's look at a simple, or maybe simple, integrated talent management system. If I take a normal process and I sign an omega sign, it here always starts with attracting people. This is what we call talent acquisition. You attract them, and the first thing you have to do is to make sure that they are getting well on board, that they feel comfortable. And it's not about where the coffee machine is or what kind of system they're operating. It is about connecting them with the team, with the leaders. finding out how can this individual new hire add value to the team. That is a proper process. Then the next thing is about how do you make sure that there is teaming, that people are getting in this AAA format where they are accountable with each other, where they are adaptable with each other, and where they are action driven, so that they do things, that they are agile. This accountable teams is very important. And then the next phase, what we have to do is about personal development or team development. Because if there's no development from an individual, that is also a dogma for me. Personal branding goes together with corporate branding. Personal development goes with organizational development. If people are not developing themselves and not enriching them in their profession, not developing their skills, not finding the way of how the team works and how they can contribute, if there's no development, then your lifetime circle will also be out. And personal development is also a matter of succession planning. What do we do? And do we announce that people so that we can give people a career perspective or a job perspective? And from this succession planning, I think the next phase is a retention dialogue. In my observations and with companies that I've met and where we deliver our systems, there's always a retention problem. The good people are leaving, or the bad people are staying, or there's always something about this. And it's remarkable that this retention dialogue is never done. Only there are exits, and then we are shocked. Another element is that if you work with salespeople, in Europe, the average time that the salesperson is in a company is about 3 years. And every time we are amazed that somebody after 3 years says, like, I found another sales job where they pay more. And then all of a sudden we are, this is a brain drain. Now, you know, the relationship he has built up are gone now. How do we recover from that to find another person to get on that level again? I mean, it's always impacting a lot on sales. Why don't we have this talk every year? We know that they are going to leave in 3 or 4 years. So if you have a good people strategy, you also talk about retention. And then the next phase is what I call replacement or right placement, because that is also an element. We are hiring people on a certain kind of profile, on technical skills, on their diploma. But is that what we really need? Is that making the significance? Or is it much more, what is the potential of the individual and is there space to grow? Can he grow with the company? And if we are in a job and we go through a cycle of a year, that is really a remarkable thing. We have a nice competency profile or a job profile. The candidate is starting, going through the cycle of a year. After the year, we have a nice appraisal. You've done well, but this could be done better. And as a reward, you can do exactly the same. That is the same as if I would send my kid to the school, 3rd grade, done well, terrific performance, my dear, start in grade 3 again as a reward. And that is what we do with people in organizations. So for me, having a retention dialogue saying, where are you now related to the development that somebody had? How can we fine tune and give you the assignments that are fitting your potential so that you can grow? Because if you can grow, we can grow. And I think that is a dialogue that we should impose or install in our way of thinking. With the right placement, you actually go through the same cycle. Because if you have 4 or 5 people who have developed themselves, then maybe the whole setting of the team has come to a new level. And this is also how we create mobility. This is how we can work with generation management. But right placement also means you should also have the guts to do outplacement, because you cannot offer everybody a job in the pyramid to become the CEO. Or how do people get an inspiration if they know they are on a job where there's no perspective anymore? So the outplacement is also something you should do actively. That means if you actively do the outplacement, you can also do actively the front door management, how to get new people in, refresh, make sure that there is mobility. In all of this, and this is what I call integrated talent management, there's one thing that is really important, and that is the leader with the connector and the leader with the communication skills. Because the leader should be involved in all parts, in the personal development, in the succession planning, he should be there. And you can say like this is the leader, the team leader, or is the senior management, or the HR leader. All should be engaged and making sure that the journey and the experience of the candidate is based on their talents. Now, having said that, this is an integrated talent model, but there's something lacking. In order to make sure that there is performance, there is another element. And this is what I call, there are two domains creating the fundamental performance. The first part is the people. And this is what I call talent management. The other part is competency management. And competency management for me is the domain for an organization to be very clear in what you expect. And this is, some call it soft skills. I would advocate, I call it the hard skills. This is how people can differentiate and have a competitive advantage in the way of their conducting their job. Competency management is for the organization a way to say like, this is how we operate. This is how we work. This is based on our culture. This is based on our strategy. And I make it very explicit for all my individual employees. What would I request from you as a behavior? How can I give you that guideline? And if you have the competency models in place and you align that with the talent model, then you have the fundament, the pillars for performance management. And in that way, if you include and actively participate people in this process, then you become agile. And it has nothing to do with Scrum or whatever. It is about your culture. Create a culture in those two domains. Create a culture where failure is seen as an attempt in learning, where we learn from each other. Because if you want to be innovative, 10 times try something, maybe one is successful. And if you're not allowing people to fail because you have your KPIs very strong, or you're very strict in your control and demand, which also says that you love your company because you are doing everything you can to secure it, but you also have to give people space to be inventive, space to innovate, space to be creative, to co-create things with each other. And that can only be done if you are really giving people the opportunity to try and allow them to do. And this is something that I want to share with you. All is about the legitimate reason for people to behave as they behave. Now, this is a little bit psychology. If you look at behavior, there are 4 elements that is justifying how people are working. And of course, you can say like, there is something, are they willing? And are they capable? Then they will show some behavior. But there are also 2 other elements. And is they are allowed? Are they allowed? Or do they have to? Now, maybe you can reflect on you as a family person. If you have children, children are sometimes maybe not so capable, but they are willing. If you say to them, but you have to, and they are insecure, they will not do it. They will resent. If they are capable but not willing, it will not go either. So the embedded legitimacy for behavior is about having the communication with your employees. If they are willing and they have the capability, they are skilled, then it's better to say like you are allowed than you have to. And if you come to the momentum. Of course, we are not living in utopia and in an anarchy where people can do what they want. But if they understand this, then you get an idea and a commitment and an engagement for people to do these things. I am doing things in my family life that I actually don't even want to do. I am capable, I'm skilling, I don't want to. But sometimes I have. And because I have this understanding that it's for the bigger purpose and for the good, I will do it. But if I am allowed to do things where I'm willed and skilled, then I get much more energy, and then it happens a lot more. I take the extra mile. And when you have to, I'm not taking the extra mile. So when you think about the psychology of people, this is what you have to understand. And the capabilities of people, the skills, that is what we call talent management. This is how you can actually say, like, if I have people who have talents, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are already skilled. Because how do talents work? And let me create another image for you to explain this. And I use an iceberg metaphor. If this is the iceberg, this is what we see. This is the manifested behavior. But what is lying underneath? Underneath is lying, of course, what we call the cognitive capabilities. And in some context, people see this as the IQ. We think there's a little bit more than IQ. There's also an emotional intelligence, etc., moral intelligence. And then there is something like your personality traits. And this is where we say, from the personality trait, your drive, comes your talent. And then there's something about your norms and your values that is pushing forward to what kind of behavior you're showing. And then there is knowledge. And this is what we can also say, this is schooling. And then there is experience. And then you get to a personal, competent behavior. That is what you show. But you only show what the environment allows you to show. Because if you're restricted or you're not in a good environment, you're playing a certain kind of role, you're not demonstrating your true value. So the environment has a big, big influence on how people are responding. And how are they responding? This is where it comes in. This is talent management. Competence management comes here. Asking people, are you capable of doing that? Do you want to do this? So here comes the COM team. If you talk about how can we help you, we can help you with the talent management, with the competency management in order to have a future-proof performance. This is all coming together in a framework that creates a mindset. It creates a mindset where leaders of this world, leaders of companies, should think about bringing humanity back into business. It's also what I said about leadership. It has some elements about parenting, taking care, doing things together. I have a family of 4 daughters and a wife, so I'm a little bit the loser in the family, fighting against 5 girls sometimes. But I know for sure that if I am not present all the time, and I'm not available as a father, I should be present. Because if I'm only telling them I'm available, my door is open, then I become obsolete. I can become completely obsolete for them. So I really have to interact, and I have to work with them, doing the homeschooling now, playing with them, having dialogues with them. This is how we bond. This is how we create social cohesion as a family. And that is the same what we have to do in an organization. People feel comfortable. If they feel well, if they can work from their strength, if they are not punished because they make a mistake, if they feel happy, they will go the extra mile, they will do the extra things to keep your company alive. And they will also bring it home. And this is how we can bring, we can use the COVID actually and all the disruption as a new phase in Earth. I truly believe then we can get in that state. Now, let me also give you another justification. And this is an economical model. And I think it's I'm not an economist. I do know something about numbers and figures. But let me give you a very clear sample of how this economically works. It's very simple. This is the timeline. This is the timeline. And this is your, you can call it economical relevance, or your position in the market, or whatever. Let's say that you are here on the first day of the breakdown, the lockdown. What are you going to do? Of course, you're going into a shock. But what will happen if you don't do anything in this period? When you don't invest, it's very clear where you're headed for. And maybe I should use another pen in this to make it even clearer. If you don't do anything, you will lose your relevance and you will go for a meltdown. Because if you're not investing and not reinventing yourself and not reorganizing yourself after in this aftermath, for the aftermath, this will happen. So what will happen if you say like, oh, I have to do something, I have to invest. And an invest can also be cutting costs. So let's cut some costs, let's drop some people so that we at least have an economical relevance. Or let's invest in whatever it is. But if it's not an investment for the longer time, what will happen? You will just extend your lifetime circle. This is what we call the lock-in. What you have to do is invest in a proper way so that you can go up, and it will always be like this. And this is a very economical, simple model. Are you going for the meltdown? Are you going for the lock-in? Or are you going to thrive? And if you look at this model for a company, you can also say like, this is also applicable for the individual. Because if the individual stays at home and does nothing and just waits, what will happen? He will go personally on a meltdown and will lose his relevance for the company. Those people who are just investing a little bit and doing a fluffy course or whatever, if they're not really growing with the company and not investing and spending time to find the solution, they will lose their relevance too, because they're in a lock-in. This is where the wrong paradigms start to block yourself. You really have to reinvent, invest in the people strategy, and that is, I think, the only way up. I can talk for hours about this, but I'm also curious, like, if you look at the big picture, what I try to create, from talent management and competence management to lead to performance management, how to organize yourself. You really have to think about your workforce, the way you are agile, your culture, your leadership, your identity, and the way you are capable of reinventing yourself in order to counterattack this phase that we are in. If you look at the psychological part of individuals, how do they tick? How can you make sure that you understand people in the right way? You have to dive in. And if you realize how long it takes for people to understand each other, just think about it. How do you meet your own partner? It started with a nice flirt. You had 6, 7 engagements with each other, encounters. Then you start to think, okay, this could be it. Or maybe I should focus on somebody else. Because to understand people is not easy. And please don't choose systems where it's simplifying humanity. Humanity is a complexity. You cannot simplify humanity, but you can do your best to understand humanity. And that is how we can support you. So really think about, how do people tick? What are their needs? And that is also an element for leadership. It is not about, I treat people the way I want to be treated. That is wrong. It is about, what can I do to treat the individual according to their needs? That is the same as what I do with my children. So therefore, the leadership is extremely important. And then for HR leadership, think about this connection. To develop a people strategy. And with my Omega sign, the whole cycle from going from talent acquisition to teaming to personal development to the retention or to the right placement, that is not something you do in a day. But if you do that together and you align leadership with this model, then something will happen. And also think about the economical principles. If you're considering now in cutting down on your human resources, knowing that the productivity has been not that bad since they work at home, why don't you cut down on the office expenditures? Why don't you rethink in a different way? Because if you cut down on people, that is also this economic model, then you end up in a price fight where you have to prove that you have some value because you are the cheapest. But that is also a signal that is not good. You lose your business. So I would strongly advocate, go back as far as you can go and only think from a humanity point of view, create a people strategy to overcome this era of dissolution, this era of stress, this era of shock. And I can tell you one thing, and I'm following quite some communication. There will be another shock. Now we have been controlled by the medical specialist who decided, we have to deal with this virus. And in order to have our medical system in place, we have to cut down. But the next shock is coming from the socio-economical part. And there's where we have to be proactive. We cannot say, I didn't see this coming. So this is how I would like to advocate, and I hope that I've contributed, and I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Well, that was excellent. Thank you so much, Andre. And we've had a lot of great discussion in our chat today. And I'd like to open it up to my colleagues here to also follow up with some questions. So I just want to mention on a personal level, as far as all these other, my colleagues coming on to play, I have over 25 years of HR experience, and 15 of those have been sitting at the executive table of healthcare, the healthcare executive leaders that have really struggled with understanding how to connect, as you talk about, and really relate with the frontline employee, particularly the nurse, the surgeon, the sterile tech, people that actually hold the patient's heart in their hands, as well as taking care of patients with ventilators and helping them through some really critical times. So how can executives break out of the boardroom, as I say, break out of sitting behind their computers and doing emails all day, and really make that connection and really understanding their employees' needs during this critical time?
The answer is actually extremely simple. Stand up and go out and dialogue. I mean, of course, there is always an element where you're sitting behind a drawing board and think about how can we plot this and how do things relate with each other. But if you're not going out, if you're not listening to people, if you're not tapping in on their voice, and this is also something that I call democracy. An organization should not be driven by democracy. There is always, out of legislation, there are many reasons why there is a top in an organization. But it doesn't mean that you cannot listen to the voice. And if you listen to the voice of the people, then you have an understanding what their needs is and what their thoughts are. So if you make a decision, you can actually communicate back. I understand your voice, I heard your voice, but this is the argument that I use for our direction, for our course. So it is really about having this continuous dialogue. And if I compare that to my family, the girls are doing all kinds of things. If I don't ask them what to do, and I can pick a holiday, then they say, why are you choosing that? Yeah, because dad really wants to go skiing. Yeah, but we want to do surfing. So it's a simple analog, but having the dialogue, a continuous dialogue, that is also what I refer to being present, not saying I'm available, or not only sending out a survey, what do you want? It is really the debate with the people. Have this discussion with the groups, with the teams, and then you will figure out how it will work.
But and I just want to add on to something to that I think that, you know, Char, the question you posed has been on my mind for the whole 20 years I've been doing culture work, is why is it so difficult to get the connect the dots thing in place that Andre, you're talking about in regards to the executive, you know, level of the organization is the one that sets the cultural tone, that sets the strategy for the company, that creates that alignment kind of pathway. And yet they're often doing so in isolation from the knowledge of the people on the front lines of the business. And, or, you know, they're doing it through a survey, you know, they're not really getting out and talking to people. And and I think there's something about that happens, at least, and I'm only speaking now for American culture because I've worked primarily here. But I think there is something about, like, once I rise up above that VP level, you know, I'm flying at 30,000 feet in the airplane metaphor, right? And I really cannot see or relate to what's happening on the ground. And I'm just preoccupied with what's happening in the cockpit. And I don't think about it that way. The importance of that, because there's no real true air traffic control in this metaphor. And that's the thing the executives are missing. They just, I think, have this mindset that, well, I've risen already, you know, above the fray, and I don't have to do that anymore. That's what I see. And I'm just being really honest about that. I know that there's probably a lot of exceptions to that, but I think there is somewhat of a mindset that, like, I'm above it, you know, and I don't have to do that anymore. And so I think it's a really powerful question to pose. How do we help people understand that that's their responsibility as they rise up the ladder through the corporate ranks? There's, you know, even more importance to them being in that conversation and dialogue and doing it in ways. There's a lot of creative ways that I've helped companies do that too, because maybe it is a little intimidating if you're the CEO to walk through the office and stop and talk to people. You know, there's this kind of thing around hierarchy that I think still happens mentally. But I just thought I would weigh in on that piece, because I think that's it's a big mystery as to why that happens, you know, and I've seen it happen with both men and women leaders at the executive suite level.
Yeah. When I explained something about what is actually an embedded legitimacy for behavior, and I said, like, you know, if you are willing, and you have the capacity, and you're allowed, things happen. But as soon as the have to comes in, then it's about power.
Yeah.
Then you should read the book of Machiavelli. When people are getting empowered and having this mandate that they can control over other people, then things start to happen for the worse. And that is also what I refer to in my keynotes. I don't believe in the control command mode anymore. That is an operating mode that doesn't work anymore. I mean, in the Ford company, it was easy. You had the brain, the thinkers of the process, and you had the body who were executing and doing the repetitive work on the treadmill.
They were detached from each other.
Scientific management for me is actually like cutting the head from the body.
Exactly.
And that has to change. And of course, command and control also means that you love your company. You want to be sure that everything is secured. But it's also imprisoning people in the way they can act and they can respond. In my dogma, I say, like, okay, I'm also not advocating that we should have an anarchy, but we should be sitting in the middle there. If we should not go for command and control, but it is the culture who gives us an order that is based on values. How can we do things? And the chaos that is there, from anarchy to chaos, I think we should come into the middle. And I call this chaotic. If you have a chaotic environment where people are making decisions based on your value, but they are happy to oppose the chaos and find things, this is where innovation, where creation starts. And I think that is the way a culture should be cultivated. A culture should evolve in that direction.
Right.
And that, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's one thing that's really clear that all business owners should be thinking about right now, is that there's no other time in history it's been so clear that there's been a disruption to the market. There's a change in what is going on, and in the past, that might have been hard to see for some industries as change happens somewhat slowly and with your competitors, but it's clear things are different now, and we need to assess how to operate with our talent, do talent differently, how to assess goals differently, and put ourselves on the right course.
Yeah, and I mean that is also a track record that you can actually pick up on all the publications there is on change management. Why is it that change management is only successful for up to a standard of 20 or 30% of the objectives? Why? Because they always forget people. The change management is brought in new protocols, new processes, new technology, but they forget the people.
Yeah, I just saw that Gabby was talking about the importance of just reaching out and understanding the importance of humanism in this new equation. I mean, that's critical for leaders to understand.
It's kind of a curious thing to me as we've been having this dialogue as to, do we think, because I've done a lot of studying on workplace revolution and the way in which we're seeing a whole new generation of younger talent that are coming in with a lot of the principles that you've explained are just more how they think already and how they were raised. And so I wonder, as the boardrooms start to shift maybe in the next decade, toward some of the people who are more inclusive and who are more leading through more of the mindsets and the habits you're talking about. I just wonder if that, I'm curious, and I don't think there's a true answer to it, but it's like, is it just positional, that by the time you get into that boardroom, you really do lose sight of it, or you lose touch? Or are we going to see a whole different hierarchy or alternative to hierarchy emerging, an alternative to these have-to styles of management? I hope and feel that it's that we're going to see a reinvention of how work structure is thought about and conceived and put into place, that just the people who grew up in our era just don't have a model for it. They've never seen it. They don't have that mindset. So what do you guys think about that?
Nonetheless, there are these examples. If you take the example of Ricardo Sandler, he wrote a book, Maverick, what he did in Sao Paulo with his factory, where he said, like, gone with all the privileges of management and let's do it in a different way. I mean, that was a revolution what he started, right? I don't know where he stands now. I don't think his company is still alive to that extent, but there is this movement, and this is also what we should be aware of. We really have to reinvent ourselves all the time, rethink every time, because once we are there, the next wave that we should jump on is already coming. Right. So this is a kind of a phenomenon, and this is why that is also a little bit my dogma. If you have to use change management, it is an indication that there is no evolution.
Agree.
An indication that you are not rethinking where you are. You're happy, we made it to the next phase. And then you wait until the lifetime time goes over, and then you have to change again. So this is also what I believe that business owners should consider.
Absolutely.
Trying to find a way where normal evolution comes.
Well, here's my opinion about that. So I've worked with some pretty big healthcare systems, and I was the one that was sitting at the executive table and the one talking about talent management, people strategies, and also witnessing the politics of self-positioning. When you have 14 executives that are all in charge of their own certain silos of the healthcare organization, a lot of them have their own motives and what it is.
They're not wearing the company hat.
Right. When you have a big, and I'm not going to talk about which healthcare system I'm talking about, but I'm just saying is that it was funny because one of the healthcare systems I worked with had, I would say, literally 6 or 7 different departments that were working on change models, and they all had their own unique change models that they were trying to influence the organization with. And it's almost like, it's like it's Titanic. And then you've got all these little tugboats. Well, we're going to influence this change. We're going to influence this change. Meanwhile, you had a very political environment happening at the very top that couldn't figure out how to connect with the frontline employee and the essential workers at the front. And there was just this like complete misalignment with understanding what you're talking about, Andre and Lisa. I mean, complete misalignment about how to be connected and how to build the relationships and how to get up out from beneath their boardrooms and their desks to get out on the front line and build those relationships instead of looking at all the little change models to really make a difference in those organizations. And
Right.
so I'm curious, why is it there's a misalignment or misunderstanding? Go ahead, Sam.
Oh, I was just going to also just point out that, that I think it was Steve Jobs that stated that he was going to only invest in 13 people and to make sure that he had healthy relationships. And I think that was part of the problem of the past, is that if we look at this manually and how we manage relationships, I mean, there's only so far we can spread ourselves before it's too thin. But I think that's some of the benefits of modern systems now. I mean, we have ways to get 360 feedback that is a lot more seamless than it was 5 years ago, or understand what makes people tick, or what they would like to do as part of their career is a lot simpler, because we have systems that can help us manage those relationships. And I think that's one of the core advantages of the TMA method, and that can help us out.
Yeah. Now this is also something that has to do with generation management. It is also what Char said, when the youngsters are coming in, they're not always understood. But the funny thing is that those who are now the decision-making units in companies, they have the children, and it's their own product to help the children to stand up and to speak for themselves and to explore. And so if you look at generation management, I mean, that is also a part of it. Think about participation, not only between men and women on the board level, but also in age. It is still on the board, you have to be over 40 or 50 in order to have that position. So, and I'm not accusing anybody or saying like discriminating that, but this is how you grew up. And if you're not open to learn from the youth and to take them in and to cooperate, then you're gone. And if I look at the characteristics of some generations, then the older generation that is now in the top, they are the idealists. They started after the Second World War and the generation thereafter for building up nations, building up economies. And then you have the generation of the skeptical people. In the 80s, it was the opportunist. Everything was possible. And now you have, like I say, the realist. But if you take those four components together, I think you have a perfect combination for an organization. Somebody working from ideals, somebody being skeptical and doing the right sanity checks, somebody who's seeing the opportunity, and somebody who's saying like, hey, let's be realistic about it. So if you combine those elements in your organization and you make sure that this is how decisions are made, not only on the top, but also bottom line, then you have a nice blend of generations and of particular characteristics. And this is what I call diversity, social cohesion, professional cohesion, making sure that people add value to each other instead of all doing the same. So if you have four idealists working together, well, you can figure that one out, I think, yourself, right?
Right. I think that's the
C-suite model. Is that what you're describing as a completely transformed C-suite concept?
Sorry, Char, can you repeat?
I'm sorry, I interrupted Sam. I was saying, are you describing an entirely different C-suite model? The C-suite? It sounds a little bit different than your typical C-suite with chief financial officer, CEO, COO, chief HR officer.
Yeah. That is what I'm advocating. And the CFO should also work on the account receivable department and trying to collect something. Where does his information come from so that he can make the right decisions? Because of course, out of legacy reasons, we need a top decision. We're not just a democracy. We're not fluffy. We really want to have a a good target and a good point of direction. But if they don't mix and they don't take in that kind of information and have youngsters in with new bright ideas, I mean, where are the universities for?
Right.
To come up with the newest ideas. And what we do with university graduates, we pick them in, we call them talents, and within 2 weeks there is this corporate source that we pour over them, and then they have to follow the social pressure. That is not the way forward.
That's right. I mean, you were talking about, Andre, about diversity and the importance of that in creating innovation and cohesive teams. And I think that a lot of managers have fallen into the old habit of having people like me because it's easy to manage. And I think now we've shown that the power of diversity, of different thoughts, of different cultures, shared ideas from different perspectives can bring great innovation. And it takes manager training to really, and coaching to develop that skill set of how can people manage this diverse group of people in an effective way. And so I think that's critically important. Also, you mentioned as far as this idea of learning from all different types. It doesn't make any difference of if you're more senior or you're junior. People that are coming out that are savvy in technology, that know the newest trends from colleges and so forth, is critical to get that knowledge and harvest it in that. And I guess some companies are doing some reverse mentoring programs to facilitate that. So absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Diversity is such an important thing in an organization. And it's also about the mindset that people are getting. If you just think about it, Sam, when you come in a team and you think like, but I can only do exactly what they can, or I cannot add any value. I mean, how do you feel? Yeah. Or if you're feeling like, I sometimes use the metaphor of Lionel Messi, the football player. I mean, he's a great football player, but he can play in Barcelona. But does that mean that he can also play in FC Porto, in a smaller team with different people? Will he? And you've seen the proof. When he is in Barcelona, he's the star. What did he bring in the Argentina team? A different set of people, a different trainer, a different setting. He didn't perform as well as in Barcelona. So I think if you think about the environment you're creating, the cohesiveness in an organization on professional and social level, I think that is extremely important.
That's interesting that you would bring that up. This person, and I may not say your name correctly, so I'm sorry ahead of time. Saking is saying, what do you to this point, what is best? Common behaviors among the leaders, right? To lead the organization in one direction, or do we have, or diversity to have wider and innovative thinking among the kind of competencies, I guess you'd say, or the behaviors we're looking for at that leadership level? Or is it about, fixing it based on an organization specific needs? So what are kind of the, from a talent strategy standpoint, I thought that was a really interesting question.
Yeah, well, every company has, of course, its own context. And you really have to look from that context and from your objectives. What do I need in order to make this alive? And do I have the right people on board in order to have that journey with me? And sometimes it means, sometimes I also meet board groups of people who are really having the right mindset, and they're doing everything there as possible. So there are companies who are having this mindset already. It is really about changing your paradigm. And this is, I think, a very important thing. If you want to make a change, you have to let go what you already knew. You have to have the courage to drop your own paradigms. And you can do that because you're living in your own little world, with your own knowledge, with your own experience, with your own credentials. But if you're not willing to let that go and open up for new things, to change your own personal paradigm, things will not happen. And if you do that as a board member,
they'll happen, but they won't change.
If you don't detach, then nothing will happen, because then you stick to the old. I mean, absolutely an open door, and a lot of the audience will understand this. But it takes the courage and the witness in order to do this. And this is the right moment. If you listen to the stories of Simon Sinek, how he is explaining it is for me is absolutely true. This is what we have to do.
Yeah, just to add on what you mentioned there, as far as the question, Lisa. I mean, one thing that leaders need to do. I mean, it may be the fact that the future leadership team is something that is very diverse and has different thoughts and so forth. But one piece that brings it together is common values. So if they have, a culture of innovation or these different things, they can still have those common values that they put out to the company. And the company of a lot of diverse people can approach those values in their unique way. But I think that's where it brings the cohesiveness together in a diverse community is having the common values that drive that direction.
I would agree with that you have that as kind of this is how we work together, treat each other, interact with each other, but then some of the competencies that you're promoting for are really specific to either that strategy or, that particular time or era of the company or where they are on their all of those things that you mentioned. I agree. That's a good way of explaining it.
Question from Brian O'Neill here, asking if you, Andre, have any examples that you can share of companies who are getting this right, especially during COVID-19?
Yeah, there is a company in the Caribbean, and then just before the COVID, they were going through a change protocol where they really reorganized everything. And now with the COVID, they started to realize, like, what is happening now? People are banned, they have to stay at home. So they really started to communicate on a different base with their people and saying, how can we proceed? So this is a very actual case where they say, like, wow, we had a clear picture on before the COVID, before the lockdown, where we were headed. Through the lockdown, the way we are communicating now, we see already things that would not work in the change management, because we are now listening actually much better to the people. So I don't know, I see some outcome. I don't know what the impact will be, but at least, they start to work on this. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that I would add to that discussion is I mentioned last week about the importance of the 3 C's: with coworkers, the company, and customers. And so when we're talking about communication, it's important to have communication with all those elements and have very good clarity. Another C for you. So basically, it's important for the company to be able to communicate the reality of the situation. How stable is the company, and from a financial standpoint, in a certain element, to ensure that they're giving this clarity to employees on what the future may look like. In addition, also understanding what the coworkers and their customers need in this new environment, or how their needs may be changing going forward. So communication needs to be very clear between all those 3 groups.
Yeah, I'm also in contact with quite a lot of companies in Europe, and what I also see there is they ask the people what would be the solution, because there is no revenue stream anymore. What are we going to do? How long can we survive? And then you talk to entrepreneurs, to people who are in the retails, who have 50 shops in Holland, for example, and his burn rate per month on wages is €500,000. He's getting some compensation from the government, but still now he has a burn rate of €200,000, which is a substantial amount of money. And he asked his people, all his people, what can we do? And you know what the people said?
What's that?
Pay me less, and let's work, and let's do things so that we can survive. And by asking the question, you get a kind of an answer. And of course, there are also people say, like, I would like you to pay me less, but I cannot afford it. And then the community stands up and then, okay, if you cannot afford it, if you don't have this reserve, then don't. And in this way, he was capable of cutting his monthly wages with 80,000 euros voluntarily with people. And this is also what I think, this can only happen if the people trust you as a CEO before the COVID. It wasn't during. That relationship was already built before that.
That's right. And to your point, I mean, it's not only, it's having that open dialogue and being clear. I mean, it's very vulnerable for leaders to be able to do that. But that when you open yourselves up and say, okay, we are facing a problem here. We are, and let's all think about this together. It creates a sense of empowerment for your customers and your coworkers, and also a degree of trust where people can come together and find a common solution that they all agree upon for future success.
Yeah.
Well, I want to interject here real quick because we are about to approach the end of our hour here, 90 minutes. But we would like to keep this conversation open. Even I do want to give some closing and respect everybody's time today with our 90-minute session. So just wanted to remind everyone that we thank you, André Blom, for your time today. Excellent information. And all of your information will be on our compteam.net website. So we'll have your presentation today. We'll have any links and information. I'll let you talk about maybe a special gift here in a second. But I also want to mention that we have recorded webinars. We have the slides that will be uploaded, and we have additional resources that we'll put on the compteam.net website. And ask you, André, did you say that you had something that you wanted to provide our people for participating today?
Yeah, of course. As we are working with talent management, we also have a tool, and that is called talent analysis. And that is not just a one-time assessment, because you will also have then the access to your personal talent dashboard, where you also get content and you get support in order to develop yourself and to figure out where do I fit best. So all the participants, if you are interested in finding out where your talents and true potential is lying, then I invite you to take this assessment. And Char and Sam will facilitate that for you.
Absolutely, we will be happy to facilitate taking this opportunity for a free online assessment, just so you can understand some of the talent people strategy Compteam TMA that offers. So please reach out to us. So thank you so much, and thank you, André, for that. So I'd like to continue our question and answer beyond the half an hour here, if anyone wants to stay on, and we can continue going through any follow-up discussions.
Okay, then I'll take a little sip.
Take some water. And we've had some excellent participation today, so thank you so much. Are we seeing any other follow-up questions from anyone here?
So Gabby, did you see any other questions that we didn't address on the chat?
No,
And Christina, I know you're looking at as well, so we may have all of them.
Well, one of the broader topics that I have here is relative to talent management strategy in general, because I know that my personal company had a talent management dashboard and a talent management process. And so, you know, now it's going to look extremely different. One, because for example, when we're talking about hiring new talent and hiring our employees, we're, you know, going out on traditional job boards, et cetera, et cetera. Well, now I have to look at rehiring my employees, not only to retain them, and then also think about my compensation and reward strategies. So either Sam and or André, I'm curious What do you think the new talent management strategy will look like today after this pandemic?
Mm-hmm. So what I would say is that the first thing is like what Andre was talking about earlier, is understanding what the new employee needs are. I mentioned earlier that it's obvious there's been a shock to the workforce, and what was once the employee value proposition that, or what was once the reason why employees worked for you may have changed significantly in this new environment. So the first thing is to understand what are the new needs and the going forward needs of your talent base, and how does that match up to the new needs of the business, and to look at that. So that's, I believe, is the first step. Would you add anything to that, Andre?
Yeah, I think we are pretty much on the same mindset. It is, of course, not easy for business owners to foresee what is happening. Let's say if you are a retailer and you have 50 shops or 30 shops around in a distribution network, where do you focus on? What is the relevance of your product, of your service? So I think that is the first step. You really have to gather around and say, like, what is now our angle in order to survive and in order to come back even stronger? And from that, you cascade it down, you break it down and say, like, what do we need? And you have to be sure that you build up a narrative from the beginning. So that is also what Simon Sinek is saying. What is the big why? That is the really true question you have to say. What is the purpose, and how do we get our economical relevance and social relevance in the future after this shock? And second element that you have to do as an organization, what will be the second shock? Because there will be one. Like I explained, it's not only about the medical part now, but it's now also about what is going to happen with, you see companies thriving tremendously on technology. Are you capable of adapting to that kind of technology inside your organization? And what does that mean for the people? Are they digitally literate enough in order to deal with that? So perhaps you even have to bring, and that is what I think strong about your 3 C's about communication. You really have to be very clear. If we are reorganizing ourselves and reinventing ourselves, it could mean that we have to let people go and hire new people who are capable of bringing us to the new future. So right. I think that the people strategy, the new people strategy, is much more on the mobility, making sure that there is a flow going on. Where you see now, it's actually like almost like a reactive process. We have the right people on board now, at least to do the job. And if one is leaving, we start looking for another. And I think that should be on a much better strategical level implemented. Right.
And another thing, like Rohan just left a message in the comments section about retooling people. I mean, is it important for us to go out there and make sure that our employee base can survive in the new environment? Do they have the right skills and competencies to do remote work more effectively, and so forth? So I think that is critically important to understand their desire to continue doing to work in the new environment, and then also learn those new competencies or enhance those new competencies that will help them be successful long term.
Yeah, maybe I can emphasize a little bit on that. And that is what I meant, why also in my Omega sign, personal development is in the top. This is so elementary in order to organize your future-proof organization. Why? If people are developing themselves, the organization can develop. But what does it take to develop? It's not sending somebody out to a course or do a digital training online. It is what I call, there should be an experimental development plan. That means it should be based on your talents, that you work and develop yourself from your strength. It should be relevant. And is it relevant for the fitness on your job, what I call the employability? Or is it relevant for your career? If that's the case, then it's about contribution and attention. And that is not from only the perspective of the individual who is developing themselves, but it's also getting attention from the team. Because if you learn something and you need to experiment, you need the space, but the team, because of all these interdependencies, need to tap in. So that means for leaders, they should create an environment where somebody can really internalize what he is offered in training or in learning. And then another element where you really have to focus on, does the development lead to performance? Because if you're maybe talented and maybe it's relevant and you do a lot of things, but it's not making any sense in terms of performance, then you have to choose another track. So for me, the new strategy is have a really strong focus on personal development of people. That is the key of integrated talent management. And that needs really a very keen eye and a very active role of leaders or team managers or whatever you want to call it. So that is, I think, where we should go. And this is like éducation permanente. It is like developing yourself for life. And that is the economical model that I also showed you. As an individual, you have to invest all the time.
Right.
That is excellent information. And it seems like the traditional performance management methods of the annual performance appraisal or, you know, the quarterly performance appraisal, I think there was already a shift with the HR professionals and maybe moving away from that. So what's your thought about that, Andre? It's about traditional performance management methods.
I think it's okay to have an annual appraisal, to say like, let's wrap it up for a year. I think this is what I would call the retention dialogue.
Right.
But if it's about appraisal and it's about inclusion and active participation, you have these dialogues all the time. And to be frankly honest, this is my observation. If I ask managers to open up their agenda and say like, can you show me how much time do you actually plot in your system or that you are really interacting with your employees? It is amazing. Just to give you an idea, somebody in Holland, according to the labor contracts, somebody is working effectively 1,640 hours. Then I ask a manager, how much time do you actually spend with that individual? It is your resource, right? This is what we call it. What is your treasury management on this individual? If you call it a treasure, how much time do you spend? Show me in the agenda. And then they say like, oh, but maybe it's like 10% of the time. Wow, that is great. So you spend 160 hours, but you have 20 employees. How much time do you work? And is there then time for something else? So if you really look how much management is engaging with each other in cooperation, even team members amongst each other, how much do they really cooperate and co-create in time? It is, to my observation, so little. And I think that should change. And you know, the scientific management what we have, the control and command, the manager are busy with protocols and processes and reading Excel sheets and data. This is what automation can do. But there's one thing automation cannot do, and that is having the dialogue and the interaction with people. So I think that should be really a mind shift. And I truly believe that if people are looking in their heart and they are honest to each other, how much do you engage, even with your own family, in order to make things work and to create the welfare that we all are longing for? I think that is why I say, and I stipulate, and I advocate very hard on it, bring humanity back in business.
That's right.
Absolutely. Yep. We need to care, have compassion, dignity, and respect always for our employees and each other. So you're speaking our language there, Andre. We so appreciate that you're partnering with us and providing this valuable service. And so how is it, Sam? So if anybody would like to take that assessment, should they just go on the website?
That's right. So if you're interested in seeing those assessments and understanding how to, learning a little bit more about the talents and strengths of yourself and your employees, go ahead and reach out to us here at CompTeam. You can go ahead and to the website address at the bottom of this page, compteam.net/WX scorecard. Put in your information there, and we'll reach out to you and with that assessment. So
right, and next week we have another exciting round of series of people strategy discussions. So Andre will continue the discussion with what you're helping us understand with people strategy around talent management. strategy, and then we have several other speakers that are going to be awesome. So we encourage everyone to continue participating. And like I said earlier, please share on your social media, your LinkedIn's, everything. Share, because this is free. This is free expertise that you would not get even if you spent hundreds of dollars at some educational series. André is providing free information today, and we're, replay the recording, share the recording, because we're going to have it on the compteam.net website. So we do ask that you share. And any other final comments, and we'll wrap up today. We're hitting 1/4 the hour.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to André for your time, and it's been a very engaging conversation, so thank you.
With pleasure, with pleasure. And Char.
Yes, thank you. We appreciate it. Have a great rest of your week.
We'll talk later, for sure. Okay.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye, buddy. Ciao.
Ciao.